And welcome to the first inaugural program of Worldview Tube Washington Report. 6:32 p.m. Central, 7:32 Eastern Standard tonight, being, of course, February 3rd, 2025. February 3rd, 2025. And joining us is our D.C. correspondent, Neil McCabe. Lots in the news today. This show, sometimes it'll be Neil and I. Sometimes it may just be me. Sometimes it may just be Neil if I get too busy. And but it's going to be a Washington report. We're going to give you the news of what's happening in our nation's capital and how it impacts you and your family. And there's more than we can cover tonight in our first 30 minutes. Neil, congratulations on our first program here.
I'm really excited. I also, obviously, I want to thank Logan for making all these connections possible. There's more to be done, but Logan's a good man.
He is.
Very patient.
He is.
He's a saint.
He's a good man. You got that right. He gets it from his mother. In fact, I wish we could release that video, Logan. We have a video where President Trump, a couple times when we were with him at Mar-a-Lago doing that interview with Mike Lindell, he said, great family, good-looking family. He was talking to my daughter, my wife, my son, Logan. And we were with him for a little bit for the interview, and then afterwards, and as he's getting ready to leave, he looks at me, he says, great family. And I said, well, thank you. I appreciate it. My wife gets most of the credit. He stopped. He looked at me. He said, I can see that. I can see that. I can see that.
It's funny. It's funny with Trump that how important family is to him and how important it is that he recognizes members of someone's family. And there are people running for office, or I remember when Dixon was running for office in Michigan, and Dixon Tudor rather, and her father was sick and then passed away. And then he would just off the cuff just talk about what a wonderful man her father was. And beyond the politics, it's just really nice to have that kind of, to have somebody who kind of recognizes that stuff and has an appreciation for family.
Indeed. All right, let's start out with this one here. D.C. tragedy, soldier on board doomed Black Hawk chopper revealed as former White House aide, 28, as D.C. crash victims remembered. I don't know what your sources in D.C. are saying, but, and I want to be gentle how I say this. I talked to one of my D.C. sources who is, I won't give away his source, but let's just say it's someone on the scene. And they're working over 24 hours straight.
Right.
And what my source told me out of DC was that this individual told him that this has taken so long for a couple reasons, but one of them is that I was told, and I have a text to prove it, the helicopter blades just shredded people.
Oh.
The chopper blade shredded people in that plane, and that his team was having to deal with that. And we're talking about people that, again, we're losing body parts here. And I'm told that this has just been horrific for those working the recovery.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I know that when I spent 8 years in the Coast Guard, and early on in my time in the Coast Guard, I knew a guy named Miles York, who was a radioman first class, who at some point in his career, he was retiring when I met him, but at some point in his career, he was a member of the Coast Guard dive team, and he was part of that rescue of the airliner that took off at then National Airport and crashed in the Memorial Bridge, or the 14th Street Bridge. And he said he had to leave the dive team. Like he was pulling children out of the water, and he just couldn't do it anymore. And it was something that he worked for, he trained for. It was something that was he thought it was the capstone of his profession,
right?
And he just can only do so much. I do want to say that there's been a lot of talk about the soldier being the
we're losing Neil. We're losing Neil. Hold on real quick. Logan, work with him on that if you would. While you work on that with him, let me play a video real quick. I don't know how many of you remember the crash on the 14th Street Bridge My father used to go over that bridge going in and out of Washington, D.C. And we had left D.C. and we had just left Washington, D.C. I don't even think it was quite a year yet when that happened. And I remember as a young junior high student watching that unfold on the news. And I think this is one of the worst crashes that we just had since that back in 1982. Look at this.
Unforgettable. This happened 43 years ago. The date was January 13th, 1982. It was 4 p.m. when Air Florida Flight 90 crashed into the 14th Street Bridge just 30 seconds after takeoff from Reagan National Airport during icy conditions. The Boeing 737 ended up in the Potomac River, just like last night's tragedy. 74 passengers and crew perished in the 1982 crash.
Looking over the rail at the wreckage, I could see people floating in the water dead.
Rick Armstrong was a photographer for DC station WUSA at the time and was one of the first journalists on the scene.
Potomac River was frozen. It was solid ice, and the plane went through the ice and broke up.
Miraculously, 5 people survived. Their jaw-dropping helicopter rescue had the nation transfixed. Flight attendant Kelly Moore was plucked to safety. Back in 1997, Inside Edition interviewed survivor Joseph Stiley.
I think all my ribs got broken from being pulled into that ice by that tow, and eventually I lost Priscilla.
He held on to another passenger as they were being pulled to safety by a chopper, but lost his grip. That's when this unforgettable moment occurred. A federal government worker named Lenny Skutnik dove into the freezing water to save Priscilla Tirado.
It was a day of tragedy and heroism at the same time.
Skutnik became a national hero. 13 days later, he was honored by President Reagan at the State of the Union address.
We saw the heroism of one of our young government employees, Lenny Skutnik, who, when he saw a woman lose her grip on the helicopter line, dived into the water and dragged her to safety.
Wow, Inside Edition. Good on them for doing that. You know, I'm a news junkie, and so I know these stories and I remember these stories. I want to go back and show you something here real quick. Take a look at this feed again, because if I remember my story correctly, I want you to take a look at that lady's eyes. When they go back to showing her, I want you to take a look at the eyes, because if I remember the story correctly, right there, the close-up shot they give a little bit, you can see that there you go, right there. Kind of hard with the older footage, it's not quite as clear. There you go. If I remember my story correctly, you can kind of tell there that she's trying to make focus. If my facts are straight from the stories I remember hearing in the news back then in 82, she was having a hard time seeing due to all the jet fuel in the water that had gotten into her eyes. So she was struggling even to see. And how many of us as Americans remember watching this story in 82 and remember watching live, as I did, the State of the Union where Ronald Reagan honored that federal worker who jumped in that water, putting his own life at risk to save her. And the comparisons, what did he say, 43 years ago? Both of these happening in January. Wow, we're going to get reconnected here. I'm hoping, praying with Neil McCabe real quick. But I want to go to a video by former U.S. Congressman Ron Paul. He's talking about USAID as well today. Listen to what Ron Paul had to say.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the weekly report. Audit USAID, then shut it down. As of this writing, when you attempt to access the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID website or social media pages, you are informed that this site can't be reached. The media reports that the new Trump administration has not only frozen USAID activities, but may be planning on bringing it back under control of the U.S. State Department. Other reports, including statements by Elon Musk, suggest that it will be closed completely. If true, the closing of USAID may be one of the most significant changes President Trump has made among the many dramatic actions in his first couple of weeks in office. Many Americans may still have the idea that USAID is a government agency delivering relief at disaster site overseas. They may still remember the bags of rice or grain with the USAID logo on them, but that is not USAID. USAID is a key component of the U.S. government's regime change operations worldwide. USAID spends billions of dollars every year propping up NGOs overseas that function as shadow governments, eating away at elected governments that the U.S. interventionists want to overthrow. Behind most U.S. foreign policy disasters overseas, you will see the fingerprints of USAID. From Ukraine to Georgia and far beyond, USAID is meddling in the internal affairs of foreign countries, something that would infuriate Americans if it was happening to us.
And you know what? He's 100% right. USAID is really, many are saying, and RFK Jr. warned us, Neil, the USAID, he warned us months ago, it is a front for the CIA. And you just heard Ron Paul saying all the things the CIA does, they're known for going in and disrupting countries and controlling them.
Yeah, it's all about manipulation and regime change. And what do you think these organizations do? And when I spent some time in 2021, about 10 months at Camp Arifjan in Kuwait, which is the operational command post of Central Command. And there were civil affairs soldiers there from the U.S. Army. And I said, what do you guys do here? And they said, we go into Kuwait and we work with gay rights groups and we help them organize. And I'm like, what? It's like, does the Kuwaiti government know that? It's like, but that's, imagine you're the Kuwaitis and you find out that the U.S. Army is sending around civil affairs soldiers to sort of like flip your country's moral codes. And that's what USAID does all the time. And the thing is, so much of this aid is hijacked by the warlords and by the contractors and the NGOs. And it's, and you have people, thousands and tens of thousands of people who are starving in a refugee situation. And you're the guy who controls the rice. That makes you a potentate. That it's, we're picking winners and losers. And we're manipulating people, and we just got to get out of this business. We just got to get out of this business. I will tell you that the number one reason why so many people were glad in Afghanistan, were glad to see us leave, is because of all the people we were helping, all of the NGOs, all of the warlords, all the corrupt politicians, and that's all USAID. And how about all that USAID money and that was going to Ukraine? And our buddy Zelensky says, I didn't get any of the money. I don't know where it went. I don't know where it went. It's, Doge shows up over the weekend. He says, I want to see where you're spending this money because there was all spending was frozen to grantees and things like that, not people's personal, say, Social Security, whatnot, but all the grantee and NGO money and everything like that was frozen. And yet on Friday, USAID was still cutting checks. And so that's why Doge and Elon Musk's team went in there over the weekend. And USAID said, we're not going to let you look at what we're doing. Well, like, who are you? And so I understand someone very close to U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Ed Martin, who used to work with Phyllis Schlafly, by the way.
I was just texting with him today to congratulate him. I cannot believe it's so amazing. He said at this news desk,
we'll send in the marshals.
It's amazing.
Fix that.
I just want people to understand the former president of Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. He has sat at this desk. He's broadcast from here. He has hosted our show that we produce here, Tamara Scott Show. That man is now the U.S. District Attorney for Washington, D.C. Praise the Lord. I texted him today, congratulated him, told him I'd be praying for him, and he appreciated that and appreciates the prayers of the audience and everybody because he's got a big job ahead of him. Can you even believe it? A few weeks ago, we were talking about some of us not being comfortable with the idea of going to Washington. Now the U.S. District Attorney is the former president of Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. Praise the Lord.
Oh, listen, and it's like, how about all these FBI agents and the FBI union taking the Nuremberg defense, right? We were just following orders. We didn't know what we were doing. They ran, in the U.S. military, you do not have access to the Nuremberg defense. You cannot say, I was just following orders. That doesn't fly in the U.S. military. And I don't think it flies in the FBI. If someone gives an FBI agent an unlawful order, I want you to infiltrate a traditional Christian group, or I want you to infiltrate a pro-life group, and we're going to expose those guys. That's not like the FBI agent's supposed to say, hold on, that's a violation of the First Amendment. I'm not supposed to be doing that. Or if you're an FBI agent and you're told, okay, we're gonna scam these guys and we're gonna frame them in a plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan, right? And we're going to arrest everybody a month before the 2022 midterm, right? The FBI agents will say, hold on, we're not supposed to be creating fake plots. It's like the FBI. Now they're the victims. They're the victims now. And it's like, hey, just following orders. That doesn't fly.
No, it doesn't fly. And you know what? In the Nuremberg, and you're a historian, I don't need to tell you this. In the Nuremberg trials, our U.S. prosecutors run up against these Nazis saying, well, we were just following orders. And they said, excuse me, there is a law higher than man. The moral law, the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, the law of nature and nature's God, the moral conscience placed on everyone's heart and mind, which is clearly described in Romans 1, Romans 2, Romans 3 by the Apostle Paul in the New Testament. And our U.S. prosecutors at the Nuremberg trial said to these Nazi officers and soldiers, I'm sorry, you know well there is a law above man because it's written on your heart and your mind. So I 100% agree.
There's also the Geneva Conventions that everybody signed too. And it's like, and there's a rule, and there's an understanding that, things happen. And obviously there were many war crimes on both sides and whatever. But the idea that the FBI could somehow claim, I didn't know, I didn't know what I was doing. They bullied me. They made fun of me. I had no choice. President Trump is defending the American people from the FBI because the FBI was basically, I would say, the number one domestic threat to American civil liberties in this country.
Amen.
Because it was the cat's paw for the Justice Department. And, the Justice Department said we got to raid Mar-a-Lago like we're Venezuela. It would fly in some Central African country where the government would raid the home of the leading opponent, the leading opposition leader. We hear about this all the time. But the FBI is like, okay, right? And Mar-a-Lago is guarded by, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's deputies were there. Secret Service were there. There were private security guards there. That could have been a shootout.
Yep.
That's just absolutely crazy. But anyway, that's not why I called.
Well, I want to go back real quick and let you comment because I moved on to the 14th Street Bridge and played a little video because that happened, I think he said 43 years ago, and I remember it clear as a bell. Yeah. But I do want you to comment on this. We're going to have to hustle because we got 9 minutes and a ton to get in tonight. I think that's going to be standard for most nights because it's coming like a fire hose from Donald Trump. But D.C. tragedy, third soldier on board, doomed Black Hawk chopper revealed as former White House aide, 28 as D.C. crash victims remembered. You want to comment on this?
Yeah, I want to say that people have said that she was a social aide with the White House. And what that means is that bachelor officers, I believe below the age of 40, maybe it's 30, but if you're a military officer stationed in the military district of Washington, you are tasked to basically show up at embassy parties and funerals in your dress blues and basically fill the room. They said that there was an event where Ralph Lauren got the Medal of Freedom, and she was the one who sort of escorted him around. That's what a social aide is. I don't want people to believe that she was actually some kind of left-wing operative who was in the Biden White House and then sort of wormed her way into this mission. It's a tragedy. We still don't know what happened. I've looked at the video so many times. I can't believe that that she didn't see the airliner. I've never flown a plane. I've flown in Blackhawks many times. I've driven a Humvee at night using the night goggles. You do not have peripheral vision because you're literally looking through a paper towel tube, right? So that's why you need other sets of eyes. But a terrible tragedy. I wish it had never happened. I mean, it's just horrible.
Yeah. Let's go to this one real quick. PJ Media, the dirty truth behind Bill Kristol's private funding by Stephen Green. That's a brand new article. Can't stop the signal. The phase popularized in the 2005 sci-fi flick Serenity has today been supplemented by Can't Hide the Data, courtesy of Data Republican, small r's, ever-improving federal government grant awards search. For example, how does a private figure like William Kristol get taxpayer money to fund his political activities? Answer is complicated, but I can show you the way. Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors received nearly $38 million in grants last year, nearly evenly divided between USAID and the State Department, because the Rockefellers don't have enough money of their own, I suppose. RPA gave significant sums. The Data Republican chart did not make clear how much, but I'm still digging. We'll update this column if I can find the number. To the Hopewell Fund. What does it do? According to the site, Hopewell has been around since 2015 and is a 501c3 public charity that specializes in helping donors, social entrepreneurs, and other change makers quickly launch new innovative social change projects. That's a lot of words saying not much. However, did I see that the organization's economic security projects provides, and it goes on to there. And it goes on from there to talk about Mr. Bill Kristol, who has just tweeted recently, as in February 2nd, the deep state is far preferable to the Trump state. And then they bring in Bill Kristol. Defending Democracy's president is Bill Kristol. And its directors are Mona Sharon, Linda Chavez, and Sarah Longwell. Judging by Kristol's presence as its directors, Defending Democracy is essentially the nonprofit arm of Kristol's post-weekly standard anti-Trump project, The Bulwark. And he's saying here that new USAID staff told headquarters will be shut down. So again, I guess he's saying that some of this money has gone to groups like Bill Kristol, I guess is what he's saying here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, of course, Linda Chavez was the treasurer of the United States under Reagan, but a very, very active supporter of open borders, one of the leading supporters of open borders. Sarah Longwell is a pollster and political consultant and specializes in focus groups. And she's always one of these ones introduced as Republican strategist who hates Trump. When you told me that you were talking about Bill Kristol's funding, I thought you were going to mention all the money he collected from the government of Turkey, but that's another story entirely.
Well, I'm using Hopewell as an example because of one of its benefactories, to the tune of $2 million last year, is another organization called Defending Democracy Together. And I guess this Data Republican is saying, for you, back to Mr. Kristol on the deep state's far preferable to Trump state. For you, the deep state is preferable because you're listed as the president of Defending Democracy, gives the EIN number, which is an indirect beneficiary of USAID through Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. You are exposed. So this is an article over at PJ Media. That's certainly inside the baseball game of baseball. I interviewed him, by the way, when he was the chief of staff for Vice President Dan Quayle. I was a very young guy. I interviewed him, and needless to say, he wasn't a very nice guy, and he's still not a very nice guy, I don't think.
Interesting. Well, back then, Quayle's office was known inside the Bush administration derisively as Fort Reagan, because that's where all the Reagan holdovers were. And I thought he acquitted himself well with Quayle, but I met him once at the Heritage Foundation, and he gave some very good advice to a group of young conservatives who were meeting there. He said, do not go after Clinton on his personal conduct. Go after him on the issues. People vote for Clinton because they agree with him on the issues. They don't care about Whitewater or the girls. And that turned out to be true. And it's a lesson Democrats should have learned about Trump, because but Kristol, his dear father was Irving Kristol, a great conservative.
Yeah. Let's see, what else do we have here? Let's talk about RFK Jr. What are you hearing in the final 3 minutes? Is RFK going to get confirmed? Is Tulsi Gabbard going to get confirmed?
Yeah. Tulsi Gabbard and RFK will get through. They have committee votes tomorrow. It's going to be the Senate Finance Committee for Kennedy and the Senate Intel Committee for Tulsi Gabbard. You look for James Lankford and Todd Young to vote for Gabbard. And what's critical, Kennedy was never in doubt because Kennedy's actually going to get Democratic votes, and he's so popular with housewives, right? So, you just don't want to mess with that contingency, that constituency.
Why is he popular with housewives? Because of vaccines and autism and what moms struggle with?
Yeah, and health and wellness, and why are you poisoning my children? Lankford, there's no Republican who did more to neutralize the immigration issue with Kamala Harris than James Lankford. That was the most important issue for people voting for Trump, and Lankford went out of his way to neutralize it with that ridiculous open border bill that Trump said don't vote for, right? A ton of Democrats wouldn't vote for it. And so Lankford's also a guy who sits on the Intel Committee, and all through the Russian collusion hoax, never said a word, never defended Trump, all the while his daughter was working for Pence. So Lankford was not endorsed by Trump during his last campaign, and he has a lot of making up to do. So does Bill Cassidy, the Louisiana senator, who's up in 26. He already has a primary opponent, John Fleming, the former congressman, and also a doctor, Cassidy and Fleming, both doctors. Cassidy voted to convict Trump in the second impeachment trial. Cassidy is chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, HELP. And so Kennedy has to get through finance and health. Look for Cassidy to try to win back some love from Trump.
Our first show, inaugural program, the Worldview Tube Washington Report. You want to give any of your social media real quick, Neil?
I'm on all the socials at Reporter McCabe, and it's a thrill to be with you. We'll see you all next time.
At Reporter McCabe. He's our D.C. correspondent. The inaugural program of Worldview Tube Washington Report, brought to you folks by you, worldviewfoundation.com. Take care.